The rain lashed my window as her photos yellowed between my fingers. The silence in the house was as profound as the emptiness her departure left behind. I thought I'd never feel warmth in these wrinkled hands again, until a small, injured bird landed on my balcony, looking at me with eyes that pleaded for the same thing I did. A second chance. Like this, if it touched your soul. It's more than a click. It's a silent embrace. Comment below on how you think this story will end. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it costs you nothing, but it means a lot to us. Thank you for being here. The rain hammered the large windows of the Sterling mansion as if trying to force its way in. Greenwich, Connecticut, was hidden behind a curtain of water, while Ethan contemplated the soaked garden from his study. The clock marked 7 in the evening, and the real estate mogul, one of the most respected in the American sector, sighed at the thought of the battle that lay ahead. Upstairs, in a room decorated with glow-in-the-dark stars and small plush unicorns, Lily sat motionless in front of a bowl of soup. 6 years old, and with the gaze of an elder. Her fingers fiddled with the edge of the table, but not once did they approach the spoon. Ethan entered with heavy steps, as if carrying the entire weight of the world on his shoulders. Dark half-moons were drawn under his eyes. "Princess, please, just one spoonful," he pleaded, sitting beside her. Lily hugged the stuffed bunny, closer, the one she hadn't let go of for 3 months since the day her mother didn't come home. The animal, worn by so many tears and hugs, seemed to be the only thing anchoring her to this world. "The doctors say you need to eat," Ethan insisted, his voice cracking with exhaustion and helplessness. "Just a little bit, okay?" The girl shook her head. She had once whispered that she was afraid the food would take her away, just like it had taken Mommy. Since then, she barely touched a bite, and her tiny body was beginning to show the signs of that silent strike. A timid knock on the door interrupted the quiet duel between father and daughter. "Excuse me, sir," the voice belonged to Clara Evans, the new housekeeper he had hired barely 2 weeks ago. Ethan looked at her impatiently. Clara, with her 48 years, her salt-and-pepper hair pulled back in a simple bun, and her hands calloused from decades of hard work, seemed out of place in that mansion of modern lines and designer furniture. "Not now, Clara," he replied curtly. "We're busy." The woman hesitated in the doorway, her dark eyes fixed on the motionless child. "I apologize for the intrusion," she murmured. "But maybe I can help." Ethan almost let out a bitter laugh. Psychiatrists, nutritionists, and child psychologists had failed miserably. And this woman, a simple housekeeper, believed she could achieve what specialists with years of training hadn't? "Go ahead," he finally conceded, getting up with resignation. "Nothing else has worked." Clara entered with almost inaudible steps, as if afraid to break the fragile silence that enveloped the room. She didn't approach the child immediately. Instead, she sat on the floor some distance away and pulled a small, time-faded rag doll from her pocket. "Do you know, little one," she began, without looking directly at Lily, "I had a daughter who also didn't want to eat. She said the food made strange noises in her tummy." Ethan watched from the doorway, arms crossed and a frown on his face. What was this woman trying to do? However, something stirred inside him when he noticed that Lily, for the first time in days, turned her head slightly, as if the words had penetrated the invisible bubble surrounding her. "This is the Fairy of Courage," Clara continued, showing the worn doll. "She's very special, you know. She has told me many secrets." The girl's eyes, until then dull, fixed on the small rag figure. The fairy whispered something. "In my ear." Clara brought the doll to her ear, pretending to listen intently. "She says you are afraid that the food will take you away, just like it took Mommy." Ethan froze. He had never shared those words with anyone. He had overheard them one night when Lily was talking in her sleep between nightmares. A silent tear rolled down Lily's pale cheek as she hugged her bunny tighter. "Can I tell you another secret?" Clara whispered, and her voice took on a different, deeper, truer tone. "I lost my daughter 15 years ago. Her name was Clara. She had leukemia, and for a long time I thought I would die with her too." Surprise registered on Ethan's face. He had hired Clara on the recommendation of his former housekeeper, without even bothering to read her full file. He had no idea of her personal history. "But I discovered something important," Clara continued, moving a little closer to Lily. "When we eat, our body transforms the food into memories. Every spoonful is a way to Hold on to those we love. If we don't eat, the memories become faint, and I know you don't want to forget your mommy's smile, do you? Lily began to sob, but it was a different cry, not of pain, but of recognition, as if someone had put words to the knot tightening her throat and heart. Do you want to do something special? Clara proposed, gently extending her hand. To Ethan's astonishment, Lily nodded and, for the first time in weeks, momentarily released her stuffed bunny to take the hand of the woman who had just entered their lives. The kitchen of the Sterling mansion, equipped with the latest appliances and designed by a famous Italian architect, had never really been used. Ethan usually ate out or ordered food from exclusive restaurants. It was a cold, impersonal space, with stainless steel surfaces that had never been stained by flour or splashed by hot oil. Clara and Lily entered hand in hand. Ethan followed at a distance, incredulous at what he was seeing. "We're going to need an apron for you," Clara said, improvising one with a cloth napkin that she tied around Lily's waist. From her worn bag, Clara pulled out a yellowed notebook with bent corners and stains from use on the cover. "This was my Clara's recipe book," she explained, reverently stroking the cover. She loved to cook even when she was sick. She said the smells were like hugs you could breathe. Lily ran her little fingers over the worn pages where childish drawings accompanied instructions, written in uneven handwriting. "Today we're going to make rain fritters," Clara announced. "They're perfect for days like this, when the sky is crying, and we need something sweet to remind us that the sun will come out later." With infinite patience, she guided Lily's hands to measure the flour, crack an egg, a task that elicited a small smile when the yolk slipped through her fingers, and whisk the batter in circular motions. As they worked, Clara told stories about her daughter, how she invented names for each fritter, how once they had covered the entire kitchen in flour after an impromptu war, how her daughter said that when frying the batter, she could hear the trapped laughter inside each fritter releasing into the hot oil. Ethan, leaning against the doorframe, watched the scene as one watches a miracle. His daughter's hands, inactive for so long, were now moving with purpose. Her eyes, previously empty, attentively followed every step. "Food is love, you know," Clara explained to the little girl. "When we eat, we allow that love to enter us and make us strong. Every bite you take is like storing a treasure inside you." When the fritters began to brown in the oil, a sweet and comforting aroma filled the kitchen. Clara took out the first one, and after blowing on it to cool it, brought it to the rag doll. "The fairy of courage always tastes first," she said seriously. "She says they're delicious, and that you were very brave to help make them." Then she offered one to Lily. The girl looked at it for a long time, as if fighting an internal battle. Finally, with trembling fingers, she took it and took a tiny bite. Her eyes widened in surprise, and then she took another, more decisive bite. "Dad, do you want to try?" she asked in a barely audible voice, extending a fritter toward her father. "Mommy would like it." Ethan approached, knelt in front of his daughter, and accepted the fritter. As he tasted it, his eyes filled with tears, not because of the taste, which was simple and comforting, but because of the gesture. It was the first time Lily had initiated an interaction since Marianne's death. That night, for the first time in 3 months, Lily slept without nightmares, with the fairy of courage next to her stuffed bunny. The news of the small culinary miracle spread quickly among the house staff. Margaret, the housekeeper who had worked for the family for over 20 years, watched with suspicion the sudden importance Clara had gained. When Ethan informed her that from that moment on, Clara would personally be in charge of Lily's meals, her face visibly tightened. "With all due respect, sir," Margaret said in a biting tone, "Clara was hired for cleaning, not as a cook or nanny. She lacks the necessary training. She has achieved what no one else could," Ethan replied, reviewing documents in his study. "Lily ate last night, and she did again this morning. I'm not going to question her methods if they work." Margaret pressed her lips together. It was she who had recommended Clara, an acquaintance from her hometown who urgently needed work after being widowed. She never imagined the woman would so quickly win the trust of the gentleman and the child. "That doll she gave the child," she insisted. "It looks dirty and old. It's not appropriate for Lily." "That's enough, Margaret," Ethan cut in firmly. "I appreciate your concern, but the decision is made." In the following days, the kitchen became the heart of the house. Clara and Lily prepared simple breakfasts together, fluffy omelets, toast with honey, freshly squeezed orange juice. The girl ate small portions, but she did so voluntarily, without tears or resistance. Dr. Mendoza, the family pediatrician, could not believe the transformation when he visited Lily a week later. "Her color has improved significantly," he commented while examining the girl, "and she's gained almost 2 pounds. It's an extraordinary advance." "All thanks to Clara," Ethan replied, gesturing toward the woman who waited discreetly in a corner of the room. The doctor looked at her with curiosity. "May I ask what method you used? We've tried every conventional strategy without success." Clara blushed slightly. "It's no method, doctor. Just stories and memories turned into food. My daughter," her voice momentarily trembled, "my daughter taught me that cooking is a way of keeping alive those who are no longer here." "Fascinating," the doctor murmured. "Child. Psychosomatics is a field still to be fully explored. What you have achieved is remarkable." As they spoke, Margaret appeared at the door with the phone. "Sir, it's Mr. Rivera. He says it's urgent." Ethan excused himself and hurried out. Edward Rivera was his main partner and rarely called unless there was a serious problem with the construction company. Taking advantage of the businessman's absence, Margaret approached Clara. "Don't get your hopes up," she whispered maliciously. "The boss may be impressed now, but when he sees who you really are, everything will change. I know people like you, who take advantage of others' misfortune." Clara did not respond. She just pressed her lips together slightly and continued silently putting away the medications the doctor had left on the bedside table. As the weeks passed, Lily not only improved physically, but began to recover some of her lost vitality. She no longer spent hours curled up in her bed. Now she eagerly awaited the time to go. Down to the kitchen to help Clara. The housekeeper had transformed that aseptic space into a warm, welcoming place. She had hung aromatic herbs to dry, lined up spices in small jars labeled with Lily's childish calligraphy, and placed the old recipe book on an improvised stand. One afternoon, while they were preparing a stew following a recipe that had been her Clara's favorite, Ethan walked into the kitchen and stayed to watch the scene. Lily, standing on a stool, stirred the pot with concentration while Clara chopped vegetables beside her. "Dad, look!" the girl exclaimed when she saw him. "I'm cooking like a professional chef." Ethan smiled, a genuine smile that rarely appeared since Marianne's death. "Can I join?" he asked, surprising both Clara and himself. "Yes," Lily replied enthusiastically. "Clara says we need someone strong to mash the potatoes." Thus, the powerful real estate mogul found himself rolling up the sleeves of his Italian silk shirt to mash boiled potatoes in a clay bowl. The domesticity of that scene contrasted sharply with his usual life, filled with executive meetings and financial decisions. "I'd never cooked before," he confessed to Clara while working. "Not even when I was a student. There was always someone who did it for me." "It's never too late to learn, sir," she replied simply. "Ethan," he corrected her, "I think after saving my daughter, you've earned the right to call me by my first name." That night, the three of them ate dinner. Together in the kitchen, something unthinkable weeks earlier. Lily told childish jokes she had learned from Clara, and for the first time since the tragedy, the sound of laughter resonated in the Sterling mansion again. When Lily finally fell asleep, Ethan invited Clara to his study. The woman entered with some apprehension. She had never been in that room before, clad in dark wood and filled with books no one read. "I want to offer you a new position," Ethan said without preamble. "You will be the house manager, with a considerable salary increase. Margaret is retiring soon, and frankly, I prefer you to take her place." Clara blinked, surprised. "That's very generous, sir." "Ethan," she corrected herself, "but I have no experience in that role. I've always been a cleaner." "You have something much more valuable than experience, wisdom," he replied, pouring himself a glass of brandy. "You have achieved in weeks what specialists couldn't in months. Besides," he added, looking directly at her, "Lily needs you, and so do I." Those last words, spoken almost without thinking, hung in the air between them. Ethan cleared his throat, uncomfortable with his own vulnerability. "I only have one condition," Clara said after a moment of silence. "To continue cooking with Lily. I think it does her good." "Of course," Ethan nodded. "In fact, I want the kitchen to be your domain. Reorganize it however you wish." When Clara retired to her small room in the service wing, she found an elegant box on her bed. Inside was a set of professional knives, the kind she had admired in a cooking magazine. A small note accompanied the gift. "So you can continue creating magic. Thank you for bringing back our appetite for life. E." Clara's promotion caused an earthquake in the domestic hierarchy of the Sterling mansion. Margaret, who had expected to retire with honors after 2 decades of service, could not hide her indignation. The other employees wavered between curiosity and resentment toward E, the newcomer who had risen so quickly. "Who does she think she is?" Margaret muttered to Ryan, the gardener, as they watched Clara direct the pantry reorganization. "She doesn't even know how to behave appropriately. A real manager keeps her distance from the employers." Ryan shrugged. He didn't care who was in charge as long as they left him alone with his plants. The tension peaked one Sunday morning when Ethan announced that Clara and Lily would prepare lunch for a small family gathering. His sister Eleanor and her husband Charles would be coming, along with their 2 teenage children. It was the first time the family had visited the house since Marianne's funeral. "Are you sure, Ethan?" Eleanor asked over the phone with obvious concern. "Wouldn't it be better to reserve a table at a restaurant? Lily is still recovering." "Trust me," he replied with a conviction that surprised his own sister. "It will be good for her. Besides," he added, "there's someone I want you to meet." Margaret, who overheard the conversation while serving coffee, saw the perfect opportunity to put Clara in her place. That same afternoon, while the new manager planned the menu with Lily, she approached them with feigned friendliness. "Mr. Charles is allergic to nuts," she informed them, "and Ms. Eleanor detests fish. The children only eat pasta, but without cheese, and Mr. Ethan likes his meat juicy, but everyone else prefers it well done." Clara looked at her intently, perfectly, understanding the intention to confuse her. "Thank you for the information, Margaret," she responded serenely. "We will take note." When the former housekeeper left, Lily looked up from her notebook where she was scribbling children's menus. "Aunt Eleanor loves fish," she said innocently, "and Dad doesn't care how the meat is cooked." Clara smiled and stroked the girl's hair. "I know, little one. Some people get scared when things change. It's like when water boils and makes bubbles. It's just their way of releasing pressure." Sunday arrived with a radiant sun illuminating the garden. Clara and Lily had spent hours preparing a Mediterranean feast, gazpacho, paella, and for dessert, torrijas, French toast in syrup, with homemade honey they had bought at the market. The table was set on the terrace, simply but elegantly. Fresh flowers from the garden in glass vases, linen napkins, and porcelain dishes that Clara had rescued from a forgotten cabinet. "My goodness, it smells wonderful," Eleanor exclaimed upon arrival, hugging her brother and then her niece, whom she found surprisingly recovered. "Lily, you look lovely in that apron." The girl smiled proudly, showing the apron Clara had made for her, with her name embroidered and small drawings of kitchen utensils. "I helped make everything," she announced. "Well, almost everything. Clara says I'm her best sous chef." "Clara?" Eleanor asked, looking questioningly at her brother. Ethan introduced the manager, who had changed out of her usual uniform into a simple but elegant dress. Her hands, though clean and well cared for, still showed the marks of years of hard work. "Pleased to meet you, ma'am," Clara said with a respectful inclination. The meal passed in a relaxed atmosphere that contrasted greatly with the tension that had reigned in the house for months. Lily, sitting between her father and Clara, ate with appetite while telling her cousins how they had prepared each dish. "This paella is extraordinary," Charles commented, serving himself a second helping. "I haven't tasted anything this authentic in years." Margaret, who served the drinks with an impassive face, could not hide her confusion at the meal's success. When it was time for dessert, Lily insisted on being the one to serve the torrijas. "There's a secret in them," she announced solemnly as she placed a plate in front of her aunt. "Clara says that when we cook with love, we put a little bit of magic into the food." Eleanor looked at the manager with renewed curiosity. This simple woman had achieved what seemed impossible, bringing joy back to her niece. After the meal, while the men talked and the teenagers played in the garden, Eleanor sought out Clara, who was discreetly tidying the kitchen. "My brother told me what you've done for Lily," she said bluntly. "I was so worried about her. No treatment was working." Clara continued drying dishes with methodical movements. "I only reminded her of something we all forget sometimes, that food nourishes more than just the body. Whatever it is, I'm grateful," Eleanor continued. "Ethan also seems different, more Present. Clara nodded slightly. Grief sometimes pulls us away from ourselves. The sir is finding his way back thanks to Lily. And to you, Eleanor added with a knowing smile. I don't remember the last time I saw him cook anything, not even a fried egg. When the family said goodbye, Eleanor hugged Clara with genuine warmth, ignoring the rigid formalities that normally separated employers and domestic staff. This gesture did not go unnoticed by Margaret, who watched from a window, her lips pressed tight and her eyes narrowed. The success of the family meal marked a turning point in the relationship between Ethan and Clara. The businessman, who had always maintained a professional distance from his staff, began to seek the manager's company beyond domestic matters. In the evenings, after putting Lily to bed, he often invited her for tea in the library and asked her opinion on topics that had nothing to do with the house, books, movies, even some aspects of his business. Clara, for her part, always maintained a respectful but approachable attitude. She spoke little about herself, skillfully deflecting personal questions to focus on Lily and her progress. One night, however, the barrier broke. Ethan had had a particularly difficult day at the office. An important project was in jeopardy due to a change in urban planning regulations. When he arrived home, he found Clara and Lily in the garden, picking aromatic herbs they had planted weeks earlier. "Dad!" the girl exclaimed when she saw him. "Look how much our rosemary has grown. Clara says it's a magic plant that keeps nightmares away." Ethan smiled, letting his daughter's simple joy dissipate some of his tension. After dinner and reading a story to Lily, Ethan found Clara in the kitchen, preparing infusions. "I thought you might need something stronger than tea," she said, offering him a steaming cup. "It's valerian and lemon balm. It helps calm the nerves." Ethan accepted the drink and sat on one of the kitchen island stools, loosening his tie. "How did you know I had a bad day?" "It shows in your shoulders," she replied simply. "They're higher than usual, as if you're carrying something very heavy." He looked at her in surprise. Not even Marianne had been so observant of his moods. "Sometimes I wonder if all this makes sense," he confessed, looking at the amber liquid in his cup. "I build buildings, sign contracts, make money, but at the end of the day, what's left?" Clara remained silent, giving him space to continue. "When Marianne was alive, at least I knew why I was doing it. For her, for Lily, for our future. Now," he sighed deeply, "now I'm not so sure. Grief makes us question everything," Clara finally replied. "It's like an earthquake that shakes the foundations. What once seemed solid suddenly reveals cracks." "How did you get through it?" Ethan asked, looking directly at her. "The loss of your daughter, I mean." Clara put down her cup and clasped her hands in her lap. Her eyes, usually warm and serene, became distant, as if looking at an invisible horizon. "I don't think you ever really get over it," she said softly. "You learn to live with it, like learning to walk with a missing limb. At first, every step is torment. Then slowly, you find a new balance. It's never the same, but you move forward." Ethan nodded slowly. "Clara was your only child, wasn't she?" "Yes, my husband and I couldn't have any more after her." A sad smile formed on her lips. "She was our miracle. We had 15 wonderful years before the illness took her. And your husband? He passed away 2 years ago. A heart attack," she replied with the same calm. "He couldn't bear Clara's absence. He slowly faded away, like a candle running out of wax." Ethan remained silent, impressed by the magnitude of the losses this woman had suffered and the serenity with which she faced them. "And yet you're still here," he finally murmured. "Cooking, caring, smiling. What other option is there?" she replied, shrugging slightly. "Life keeps flowing like a river. We can sit on the bank, lamenting what the current took away, or we can follow its course carrying the memories with us." That night, for the first time since Marianne's death, Ethan spoke freely about his wife, how he had met her in college, her contagious laugh, her passion for photography, her fears, her truncated dreams. Clara listened without interrupting, simply offering her presence and attention. When the clock struck midnight, Ethan realized they had been talking for hours. "I'm sorry for keeping you so long," he apologized. "You must be exhausted." "Don't worry," she replied, returning to the formal address. "It was an honor to listen to you." As she stood up to leave, Clara stumbled slightly. Ethan held her arm, noticing how thin she was under her simple clothes. "Are you okay?" he asked, concerned. "Just a little dizzy," she replied, gently pulling away. "Nothing serious." Ethan watched her as she left the kitchen with deliberately firm steps. There was something about Clara Evans that didn't quite fit the image of a simple housekeeper. Her dignity, her wisdom, her way of expressing herself, everything about her suggested a more complex history than she let on. The next morning, while checking emails in his study, curiosity overcame his usual respect for privacy. He opened Clara's personnel file, which he had barely glanced at when hiring her. He looked for references, work history, any clue about her past. What he found left him perplexed. Before working as a housekeeper, Clara Evans had been a literature professor at a prestigious high school in Boston for over 20 years. Literature professor? Ethan's voice echoed in the small office that served as the manager's workspace. Clara looked up from the shopping list she was preparing and saw the file in the businessman's hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" Clara calmly placed the pencil on the table. "You didn't ask, sir." "Ethan," he automatically corrected. "You know I prefer you to call me that when we're alone." "Ethan," she conceded. "I didn't consider my former profession relevant. I was hired to clean, not to teach." He flipped through the document, increasingly confused. PhD in Hispanic Philology from Boston University. Author of 3 books on children's literature. Awarded for her teaching work, he read aloud. How does someone with these credentials end up cleaning houses? A shadow crossed Clara's face. She stood up and gently closed the door before replying. "After losing Clara, I couldn't go back to a classroom full of children," she explained in a controlled voice. "Every child's face reminded me of what I had lost. I requested a leave of absence that turned into permanent leave. My husband got sick shortly after. Medical expenses consumed our savings. When he passed away, I sold our house to pay the debts and had to look for work. At my age, and with a gap of years in my resume, options were limited." Ethan felt ashamed of his initial accusatory tone. Clara's story revealed a silent dignity that impressed him even more than her academic credentials. "I'm sorry," he said, placing the file on the table. "I shouldn't have intruded on your private life." "It doesn't matter," she replied with a small smile. "It's not a secret. Just a closed chapter. But it explains a lot of things," Ethan continued thoughtfully. "Your vocabulary, the way you teach Lily, they're not typical of a maid?" Clara completed, with a glint of humor in her dark eyes. Ethan blushed slightly. "I didn't mean that. Work doesn't define who we are," she said simply. "It only defines what we do for a few hours a day." That revelation subtly changed the dynamic between them. Ethan began to pay more attention to the small details he had previously overlooked. How Clara gently corrected Lily's grammar while they cooked, the small library of classics she had been building in her room, the literary quotes she sometimes slipped into conversations. One afternoon, while Ethan worked in his study, he heard laughter coming from the garden. Peering out the window, he saw Clara and Lily sitting under the old oak tree, surrounded by books. Clara was reading aloud, gesturing dramatically, while the girl listened spellbound. He quietly went downstairs and approached from behind, not wanting to interrupt. Clara was reading Don Quixote, but she did it in such a vivid and accessible way that Lily followed the story with fascination, despite the text's complexity. "In a village of La Mancha, the name of which I have no desire to call to mind," Clara recited, and then interrupted the reading to explain. "Do you know why he doesn't want to call it to mind, Lily? Because sometimes places bring us sad memories. But Don Quixote doesn't let that sadness stop him. He decides to create his own adventure." Ethan found himself smiling. He didn't remember the last time he had read a book that wasn't about business or architecture. "Can I join?" he asked, revealing his presence. Lily clapped enthusiastically, making room for him on the blanket they had spread on the lawn. "Dad, Clara is reading to us about a man who thinks windmills are giants." "Don Quixote?" Ethan nodded, sitting next to them. "I read it in high school, 1,000 years ago." "And did you like it?" Clara asked with genuine interest. Ethan reflected for a moment. "Not really. I found it boring and complicated. I guess I didn't have good teachers." Clara smiled. "Or perhaps it wasn't the right time. Books are like food. You have to try them in the right season of life." That comment resonated in Ethan's mind for days. How many things had he dismissed prematurely because it wasn't his season? Meanwhile, Margaret had not been idle. The former housekeeper, now relegated to minor tasks, watched the closeness between the gentleman and the new manager with increasing suspicion. One night, While cleaning Ethan's study, she found Clara's file on the desk. She quickly flipped through it, photographing the most revealing pages with her phone. The next day, during the staff lunch, she casually dropped the information. "Did you know our dear manager has a PhD?" she commented while serving the soup. "A professor cleaning toilets. How curious, isn't it?" The other employees exchanged surprised glances. "How do you know?" asked David, the chauffeur. "I have my sources," Margaret replied mysteriously. "The strange thing is that she would abandon such a prestigious career to end up here. There must be something else, some scandal that forced her to flee. Or maybe she just needed a job," interjected Ryan, the gardener, who felt some sympathy for Clara. "Not all of us are lucky enough to keep the same job our whole lives." "Naive," Margaret scoffed. "Something doesn't add up, and I'm going to find out what it is." The seed of doubt was sown. Soon, small comments and suspicious glances began to circulate among the staff when Clara passed by. The manager pretended not to notice, but Ethan, more observant than many believed, perceived the change in the atmosphere in the house. "Has something happened with the staff?" he asked Clara one afternoon while they reviewed the weekly menu together. "I noticed them. Different." Clara sighed slightly. "Margaret discovered my past as a professor. Now she's speculating about why I left that career." "That's unacceptable," Ethan indignantly declared. "I will speak with her immediately." "Please don't," Clara requested, gently touching his arm. "It would only make things worse. Time will put everything in its place." Ethan reluctantly agreed, but from that day on, he began to observe the interactions between the staff more closely. What he saw disturbed him. Margaret had created a small court of allies who followed her instructions to monitor Clara's every move, reporting any behavior they deemed suspicious. The situation reached a critical point when one Friday night, Ethan unexpectedly returned from a business trip that was supposed to last until Sunday. Upon entering the house, he heard agitated voices coming from the kitchen. He approached silently and saw Margaret confronting Clara with a piece of paper in her hand. "This explains everything," the former housekeeper was exclaiming. "I researched it online. You were working at St. Patrick's High School when that embezzlement scandal occurred. That's why you left." Clara, pale but serene, held her back straight. "You don't know what you're talking about, Margaret." "Oh, yes, I do. Funds meant for scholarships that mysteriously disappeared. You were the program administrator. Too much of a coincidence, don't you think?" Margaret smiled triumphantly. "Mr. Sterling should know who he has left his daughter with." "Mr. Sterling already knows." Ethan's voice, cold as steel, made both women turn around with a start. He advanced into the kitchen with a determined step. "Margaret, go to your room. We'll talk tomorrow." "But, sir, I have proof." "I said tomorrow," Ethan cut in with a tone that brooked no argument. When Margaret withdrew, casting a final vengeful look at Clara, Ethan turned to the manager. "Is it true? Was there an embezzlement scandal at your school?" Clara nodded. Slowly. "Yes, there was. But I wasn't involved, Ethan. I was the one who reported the irregularities." The library of the Sterling mansion, with its dark wood shelves and leather armchairs, became the setting for Clara's confession. Ethan listened in silence, his hands clasped under his chin, as she recounted the story she had tried to leave behind. "It was the scholarship program for children from low-income families," Clara explained, her gaze fixed on the fireplace flames. "I coordinated the applications, reviewed the files, ensured the money reached those who truly needed it. It was a job I loved because I saw the direct impact on those children's lives." She paused and took a sip of the cup of tea Ethan had offered her. "One day, I noticed discrepancies in the accounts. Small at first, but they increased. Funds allocated to students that never reached them. Invoices for school supplies that no one had seen. When I investigated further, I discovered that the assistant director, Victor Hayes, was diverting that money." "And you reported him?" Ethan asked. Clara nodded. "First internally, following protocol, but Hayes had powerful friends on the school board. My complaint was dismissed, so I went to the press." Her eyes darkened at the memory. "The scandal erupted, but not as I expected. Hayes counterattacked, accusing me of being responsible. He fabricated evidence, manipulated documents, got former scholarship recipients to lie under pressure. My word against his. And he had better contacts." Ethan frowned. "Wasn't there an official investigation?" "Yes, but by then the damage was done. My reputation was destroyed. Some parents withdrew their children from my classes. I received accusatory looks in the hallways. The school asked me to take a voluntary leave of absence while everything was clarified. Clara let out a deep sigh. Finally, the investigation exonerated me, but it was too late. Clara had relapsed into her illness, and I needed to be with her, not fighting legal battles. When I wanted to return months later, they told me my position had been filled by someone else. Legally, they couldn't fire me, but they found a way to make my return impossible. "And you never tried to clear your name publicly?" Ethan asked, increasingly indignant at what he was hearing. "My daughter was dying," Clara replied simply. "I realized there are battles not worth fighting. I preferred to dedicate my energy to the days I had left with Clara." Ethan stood up and walked to the window. The rain was falling again over Greenwich, like that first day Clara had entered their lives. "Margaret must apologize," he finally said, "and then she will be dismissed." "It's not necessary," Clara intervened. "Margaret is elderly. She has spent her entire life working for families like yours. This job is all she has." "She tried to defame you. She did it out of fear," Clara explained, with a comprehension that surprised Ethan. "Fear of losing her place, her identity. We all cling to something when we feel the ground moving beneath our feet." Ethan looked at her with a mixture of admiration and perplexity. Clara's ability to forgive, to see beyond people's immediate behavior, was completely foreign to his world of relentless competition and immediate results. "You are an extraordinary woman, Clara Evans," he finally said, approaching her. "I am glad every day that you came into our lives." A subtle blush colored the manager's cheeks, who lowered her gaze to her hands. "I only try to live according to what I believe," she replied. As the poet Robert Frost once said, "In questions of taste, the majority verdict is final. In questions of truth, the majority verdict is irrelevant." "Literature again," Ethan smiled. "You should tutor Lily. Formally, I mean. Her in-home tutor doesn't completely convince me." "It would be an honor," Clara replied, with a sparkle in her eyes that Ethan hadn't seen before. The next morning, Margaret was called to the study. She entered with her head held high, convinced that Ethan would agree with her once she presented all her proof. To her surprise, she found Clara sitting next to the desk. "Margaret," Ethan began in a serious tone, "I have spoken extensively with Clara about the accusations you made last night. I have verified her story, and I inform you that they are completely false and unjust." The former housekeeper paled. "But sir, the articles, they only tell part of the story," Ethan interrupted. "An official investigation exonerated Clara of any responsibility. In fact, she was the one who reported the fraud." Margaret looked at Clara in disbelief. "In any other circumstance," Ethan continued, "this would be grounds for immediate dismissal. However," he paused meaningfully, "Clara has interceded for you. She says your years of service deserve consideration." Margaret's surprise was evident. "Therefore, you will continue working here, but under Clara's direct supervision. I expect a formal apology and an immediate change of attitude. This is your last chance, Margaret." When the woman left the study, visibly affected, Clara turned to Ethan. "Thank you for respecting my request." "I'm not sure it's the right thing to do," he confessed. "People don't usually change that easily." "Sometimes they just need a reason to," Clara replied, "and gratitude can be a powerful catalyst." That same afternoon, while Clara helped Lily with her math homework, Margaret appeared at the study door. She carried a tray with 2 cups of hot chocolate and freshly baked cookies. "I thought you might like something sweet while you study," the elderly housekeeper said in an uncertain voice. "The cookies, I made them following the recipe in your notebook, Miss Clara. I hope they're okay." Clara smiled and moved the books aside to make room for the tray. "They smell delicious, Margaret. Don't they, Lily?" The girl nodded enthusiastically, oblivious to the tension between the two women. "Would you like to stay and try them with us?" Clara invited. Margaret hesitated, surprised by the offer. I have to finish ironing the sheets." "They can wait," Clara said softly. "I was going to tell Lily how to make authentic Spanish hot chocolate. Maybe you could add how it was made in your hometown." Something in Margaret's gaze subtly changed. For the first time, she looked at Clara not as a rival or an intruder, but as someone offering her a place at the table, literally and figuratively. "Well, my grandmother added a touch of cinnamon and a bit of orange peel," she said, tentatively sitting on the edge of a chair. She said it was the secret to keeping worries away. Lily listened, fascinated, as the two women, so different from each other, began to exchange family recipes and traditions. It was the beginning of a fragile but real truce. That night, when Ethan went to his daughter's room to say goodnight, he found her drawing intently. "What are you doing?" "Princess?" "A recipe book," she replied without looking up. "Like Clara's, but this one will be ours. Clara says every family has its own book, with its secrets and stories." Ethan looked at the childish drawing, a representation of the mansion kitchen, where four figures, Lily, Clara, himself, and to his surprise Margaret, appeared smiling around a table. "Is that us?" he asked, pointing to the drawing. Lily nodded. "Our kitchen family," she explained with a child's simple logic. "It's not the same as before, but Clara says families sometimes change. Like recipes, when you don't have all the ingredients, the important thing is that it still tastes good." Ethan kissed his daughter's forehead, moved by the wisdom in her innocent words. Clara wasn't just feeding Lily's body. She was nurturing her soul, teaching her to find balance in a world that had lost its center. Time passed with the tranquil cadence of the seasons. Summer gave way to autumn, and the golden leaves in the garden became a crunchy carpet under the feet of Lily, who ran chasing Ginger, the golden retriever puppy Ethan had adopted for her 7th birthday. The house had changed, subtly at first, and then more evidently. It was no longer the elegant but cold mausoleum it had been after Marianne's death. Now it vibrated with a different, warmer and more welcoming energy. The kitchen had become the true heart of the home, where even Margaret, after her initial hostility, now found her own space, helping with her traditional recipes. Clara had also taken on the role of Lily's tutor, complementing the formal education the girl received at school. Her lessons, filled with literary references and practical experiments, awakened an insatiable curiosity in the little girl. "I've never seen Lily so enthusiastic about learning," Ethan commented one afternoon, watching his daughter sort tree leaves for a herbarium. "Before, she saw studies as an obligation. Now it seems like an adventure to her." "Because it is," Clara replied, hanging the herbs they had collected to dry. "Knowledge shouldn't be something imposed, but something discovered, like the flavors in a recipe." Ethan smiled. Clara's culinary metaphors had become part of the family language. "Speaking of recipes," he said, changing the subject, "Eleanor and Charles have invited us to spend the weekend at their country house. The whole family will be there to celebrate their anniversary. I would like you to come with us." Clara stopped what she was doing and looked at Ethan in surprise. "Me? But it's a family gathering." "Exactly," he replied with a certainty that disconcerted her. "Lily considers you part of the family, and so do I." Those words hung in the air between them, laden with a meaning neither dared to name openly. In recent months, the relationship between Ethan and Clara had evolved into a complicity that transcended the employer-employee dynamic. They shared readings, long walks in the garden, conversations that extended late into the night. But both maintained a prudent emotional distance, aware of the complications a closer approach could bring. "It wouldn't be appropriate," Clara finally said. "Staff doesn't mix with family at private events." "You wouldn't be going as staff," Ethan insisted. "You would go as our guest. Besides, Eleanor specifically asked for you. She wants you to teach her how to make that pumpkin pie she liked so much last time." Clara hesitated, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. "I'll think about it," she finally conceded. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish with these herbs before they spoil." Ethan nodded, respecting her reluctance, though he didn't share it. For him, social conventions had lost importance compared to the undeniable reality. Clara Evans had become an essential part of their lives. That night, as Clara tidied her small room, a soft knock on the door surprised her. It was Margaret, with a package wrapped in simple paper. "Excuse the interruption, Miss Clara," the elderly housekeeper said. "I just wanted to give you this before you leave for the weekend." "I haven't said I'm going," Clara replied, inviting her in. Margaret placed the package on the bed. "You will," she affirmed with a certainty that disconcerted Clara. "The child needs you, and the sir does too." Clara opened the package with curiosity. Inside was a fine wool dress in a dark green tone, elegant but not ostentatious. "It was my daughter's," Margaret explained. "I gave it to her years ago, but she never got to wear it. I thought it would look good on you for the country." Clara touched the fabric with trembling fingers, moved by the gesture. "I can't accept it, Margaret. It's too personal." "Please," the elder insisted. "It's been stored for too long. Things like people need to be useful so they don't wither." Clara recognized in those words an echo of her own teachings. She nodded slowly. "Thank you. I will take good care of it." Margaret prepared to leave, but before doing so she turned back with an unusually vulnerable expression. "I know I was unfair to you," she said softly. "Fear makes us make terrible mistakes." "It's been forgiven for a long time," Clara replied sincerely. "It's not just that," Margaret continued, nervously twisting her apron between her fingers. "I wanted to tell you that I'm glad you're here. The house lost its soul when Mrs. Marianne left us. You have brought it back in a different way, but you have brought it back." After these words, the elder woman hurried out as if ashamed of her own vulnerability. Clara stayed contemplating the dress, deep in thought. Perhaps Margaret was right. Maybe it was time to allow herself to be part of something bigger than her own grief. The weekend at the Stirling country house turned out to be a turning point. Located in the Berkshire Mountains, the property was more rustic and cozy than Ethan's mansion. Wooden beams, stone floors, fireplaces in every room. Everything breathed authenticity and warmth. Eleanor greeted Clara with a hug, as if she were an old friend and not her brother's manager. Charles, a lawyer with an amiable character, proudly showed her his vegetable garden, where he grew organic vegetables. Lily's cousins, already teenagers, naturally included her in their conversations about books and movies. The first night, after a hearty dinner washed down with local wine, the adults gathered around the fire while the young people watched a movie in another room. The conversation flowed with the ease that comes with trust, and soon Clara found herself sharing anecdotes from her years as a professor. "You should go back to teaching," Eleanor commented, pouring her more wine. "Ethan told us how much Lily has improved under your tutelage." "I like what I do now," Clara replied sincerely. "There are different ways to teach, and the kitchen is a wonderful classroom." "Speaking of cooking," Charles interjected, "that apple pie was something to write poems about. Could we know the secret?" Clara smiled, pleased by the compliment. "Cinnamon, clove, a pinch of ginger, and above all, patience. The apples must caramelize slowly. There are no shortcuts. Like life itself." Charles nodded. "The best flavors require time." The evening stretched late, with family stories that included Clara, as if she had always been there. When everyone finally retired to rest, Ethan walked her to her room. "See?" he said with a smile. "I told you you would fit in perfectly." Clara nodded, visibly moved. "Your family is wonderful, Ethan. Lily is very lucky to be surrounded by so much love." "You have contributed to that," he replied, leaning against the doorframe. "You have built bridges where there were only chasms." They looked at each other in silence for a moment that seemed to stretch indefinitely. Ethan took a small step toward her, but Clara subtly retreated. "It's late," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A long day awaits us tomorrow." Ethan nodded, respecting the invisible barrier she had just erected. "Sleep well, Clara." Alone in the room, the manager sat on the edge of the bed, contradictory emotions stirring within her. The warmth of the family welcome contrasted with the feeling of not truly belonging to that world. No matter how much they treated her as an equal, there were differences that could not be ignored. Differences of class, history, possibilities. Furthermore, there was the ever-present shadow of Marianne. Portraits of the deceased wife discreetly adorned the house walls. Her name naturally came up in family conversations. It was evident that she had been deeply loved, not only by Ethan and Lily, but by all the Stirlings. What right did she, Clara Evans, have to occupy a space that belonged to another? Wouldn't she be betraying the memory of Lily's mother if she allowed her feelings for Ethan, feelings she didn't even dare to name, to blossom? With these troubling thoughts, she finally lay down, although sleep was slow to come. And when it did, she dreamed of her own daughter, Clara, smiling as they baked cookies in a bright kitchen she didn't recognize. During the house renovations, workers discovered a hidden box in the music room. Inside, Ethan found a blue notebook that had belonged to Marianne, filled with recipes written in her elegant calligraphy. "They're recipes," he said, surprised. "I didn't know Marianne had a recipe book." Flipping through it, they found a section titled, "For when Lily is older, recipes I want to teach her." Emotion overwhelmed Ethan upon seeing this unexpected legacy. She never got to teach her any. Lily was too young when— "Now Lily will be able to know them," Clara said softly. "This notebook is a gift, Ethan, a part of Marianne that returns to you." Thus began a tradition that transformed the family dynamic. Every Sunday they selected a recipe from the notebook and prepared it together. During these culinary sessions, Ethan shared anecdotes about Marianne, how they met, her passion for music, her little quirks. To everyone's surprise, even his own, these memories no longer brought pain, but a sweet melancholy mixed with gratitude. One night, after putting Lily to bed, Ethan confessed something he had discovered in the notebook to Clara. "There's a letter addressed to Lily for when she was older. Marianne must have written it when she knew she was sick. Have you read it?" Clara asked. Ethan nodded. "Marianne tells Lily that she hopes if she's no longer there, both her daughter and I have found a way to be happy again, that she doesn't want us to live in the shadow of her absence." His voice cracked slightly. "She specifically says, I hope it's someone who teaches you to see the beauty in simple things, who reads you stories, who helps you discover your own path, someone wise and kind, who knows that love is not about replacing what's lost, but about creating something new from the fragments." Ethan's eyes sought Clara's with intensity. "She was describing someone like you, Clara. Although she never met you, somehow Marianne was describing exactly what you have been for us." Clara felt her heart beat wildly as Ethan continued. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what we are, about what we could be, and if you ever feel the same way, my door is open." With these words, he planted a soft kiss on her cheek, leaving her motionless. 1,000 thoughts stirring in her mind like trapped butterflies. The following days passed in an atmosphere of silent expectation. Small details revealed the change between Ethan and Clara. Fresh flowers in the kitchen every morning, poetry books casually left on the table, gazes held a second longer than necessary. One afternoon, while they were preparing cookie dough, Lily asked a disarmingly direct question. "Clara, do you love my dad?" "Of course I love him, little one. I love everyone in this house," she replied cautiously. "Not like that. I mean, do you love him like in the fairy tales, like wanting to stay with us forever?" Before Clara could formulate an answer, they were interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Victor Hayes, her former colleague from St. Patrick's. "I need to talk to you, Clara," he said with evident nervousness. "It's important." Victor explained that an investigative journalist had reopened the school fraud case, discovering evidence that definitively incriminated him. "I've come to apologize and confess everything. The investigation has been reopened. They'll find me out anyway, and I want to do the right thing for once." The news hit Clara like a cold wave. After so long, the truth would come to light, and her name would be cleared. "The journalist will publish his investigation next week," Victor continued. "Your name will be completely cleared. The school will probably contact you to offer compensation, perhaps even your old position." This revelation left Clara at a crossroads. On one hand, the opportunity to vindicate her name and resume the academic career she had loved. On the other, the life she had built with the Sterlings, full of simple but profoundly meaningful moments. During the following days, while waiting for the story to become public, Clara reflected on her future. She remembered the words from a book she had found in the library. "Everyone gives what they receive, and then receives what they give. Nothing is simpler. There is no other rule. Nothing is lost, everything is transformed." That phrase illuminated her path. She didn't have to choose between her past and her present, but integrate them into a future that contained the best of both worlds. The news broke exactly as Victor had predicted. The newspaper The Educator published an extensive article detailing the fraud at St. Patrick's and the unfair accusation against Clara Evans. The impact was immediate. Journalists requesting interviews, former colleagues expressing their support, former students wanting to contact her. To escape the media whirlwind, Clara, Ethan, and Lily had a picnic in Central Park. The girl had insisted on celebrating the Day of Justice in the park. "How do you feel?" Ethan asked. "Strange," Clara replied. "Like I'm watching a movie about someone else. That Clara Evans, the PhD in philology, seems so distant now." Then she told him her decision. She would not return to her old position as a regular professor. Instead, she had designed an educational program that combined literature and cooking, as therapeutic tools for children who had experienced trauma or loss. I could develop it as a pilot project at St. Patrick's, but also offer it to other schools, even pediatric hospitals, she explained enthusiastically. It's not about choosing between my past and my present, but about creating something new from both. And how do Lily and I fit into that new world? Ethan asked with unusual vulnerability. Clara took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his naturally. You are the center of that world, if you want me to be. Ethan brought Clara's hand to his lips. We do. I do, Clara. I waited patiently for you to be ready to hear it, but I can't keep quiet any longer. I love you, we love you, Lily and I. I love you too, Clara replied, moved. I resisted for a long time, because I was afraid I was somehow betraying the memory of Marianne, or of Clara, as if the heart could. Only hold one love at a time. The heart doesn't work that way, Ethan said. It expands to welcome new loves without losing the old ones. Marianne will always be a part of us, just as Clara will always be a part of you. But that doesn't mean we can't create something new together. When asked how she would feel if Clara were a permanent part of their family, Lily replied naturally, like my new mommy? That would be great. Does that mean you'll stay with us forever? If you and your dad allow. Me, yes, I will stay forever. Lily jumped for joy. Finally! I'd asked the stars to let you stay forever, but they were taking a long time to answer. A year later, the Sterling mansion was unrecognizable. It was no longer the elegant but cold space it had been after Marianne's death. Now it vibrated with life in every corner. The kitchen had been transformed into the true laboratory of the Words and Flavors program that Clara had successfully developed, where children who had suffered trauma found healing through literature and gastronomy. One sunny Saturday morning, the house filled with guests for a special celebration. Eleanor and Charles, the teenage nieces and nephews, even a repentant Victor Hayes with his daughter and newborn grandson. Colleagues from Clara's program and some of the children who had participated in the first therapeutic workshops also attended. When everyone was gathered in the garden, Ethan gently tapped his glass to get their attention. Dear friends and family, thank you for joining us on this very special day. A year ago, when Clara started her program, many doubted that literature and cooking could be combined as therapeutic tools. Today, with more than 50 children benefited and the interest of 3 hospitals in implementing it, I think we can say it has been a resounding success. Applause interrupted his speech, while Clara, moved, bowed her head. But there's something else we want to share with you, Ethan continued. Something that, in a way, started with a rejected bowl of soup and a small doll called the Fairy of Courage. Lily, holding that very rag doll, smiled widely. 6 months ago, I asked Clara to share not just our table, but our entire life. And she, to our fortune, accepted. Clara raised her left hand where a simple ring discreetly shone. Some guests gasped in surprise, others smiled knowingly. But today we have something else to announce, Clara said. Something that even Lily doesn't know yet. Our family is going to grow. In 6 months, Lily will have a little brother or sister. The reaction was immediate. Shouts of joy, astonishment, and Lily jumping with excitement. I'm going to be a big sister. I'll finally have someone to teach all my recipes to. Later, as the party began to wind down, Lily approached Clara with a serious expression. Mommy Clara, will the baby coming be able to know Mommy Marianne and Clara? Not physically, Clara replied sweetly, but they will know them through our stories and memories. Your Mommy Marianne will live in the recipes from her notebook that we will teach, and Clara will live in every fairy of courage we create together, in every story about how food can heal the soul. Then we'll be a very special family, Lily concluded, with people we can see and people who live in memories. Exactly, Clara confirmed, because love, like good ingredients, never truly disappears. It just transforms into something new, equally valuable.